Hey friends, it's Laura with Laura B Floss Tube. Welcome or welcome back. I'm so glad you joined me today. You may have heard that we are going to be starting another sew-along starting August 1st of 2024. I have another quilt that I want to get off my to-do list, so we're going to attempt to complete the Be Happy quilt, which was originally released in 2017 by Lori Holt. She has all of the blog posts still on her blog. I know there is also a book out there. Some of you may have that. So if you do, you are probably in better shape than I am, because I'm going to be using the blog post and the cutting guide and my scraps and trying to accomplish this very detailed, very large quilt. So I've had several questions from you guys asking how much fabric and how to get prepared and what all you need and everything like that. So I thought I would go through some of the things that I'm going to be gathering and how I'm accomplishing this quilt. Now I would preface this by saying, if this is your first applique quilt with Lori Holt that you have done, then I might not go this path. I have a lot of fabric scraps left over from Hometown, How to Build a Scarecrow, and a few other sew-alongs I've done. And so I've purchased kits for all of those quilts, and typically when you purchase a kit, you have way more than you need to accomplish the finished quilt. So that's where I got all my scraps from. Now I also have some yardage back here of Hometown because I fell in love with the Hometown line. So I definitely have some yardage back here as well. I also have some background fabrics that I've just collected and added to my stash. So that is what I'm starting with. I am just starting with scraps and some yardage, and I'm not purchasing the kit. So one of the other things I would say is that if you've seen some of my other sew-alongs in the past for these quilts, you'll notice that I typically cut out everything in advance and I baggie it up and I am ready to go each week. I'm not doing that with Be Happy. Be Happy, I'm taking the approach that I'm going to use my scraps, I'm going to cut what I need each week, and I'm going to make those blocks each week. Now the only thing that I'm going to do in advance is I am going to trace all of my shapes onto the interfacing so they'll be ready to go and available to me when I need them each week. So I'm going to put the schedule up here so you can see kind of what the rundown is going to be. If you have seen her blog, if you've looked through all of her posts for Be Happy, then you know that she saved all those hexies for the very end to do that border on the quilt, and I'm not going to do that. That's where I'm going to start. So, and actually I'm probably going to start before August 1st, but beginning August 1st, that's when I'm going to share my tips and tricks on getting those hexie blocks done for your border. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the hexie border, and that doesn't mean that I'm going to have all the hexies done that first week either. It just means I'm going to start them, and then each week I'm going to do the blocks that we're talking about, and then I'm going to do a few hexies in addition. So I'm going to try to break that border down and get it going as we go along, and by the end of our sew along, I should, in theory, have all those hexie blocks done and be able to put together that hexie border, and then be able to put together the quilt top and the outside borders and have my quilt top finished for Be Happy. Now that is all in theory, because I know there's a few blocks in this quilt that are a little intense, and so we're just going to work through them together. Don't be scared, because then I'll be scared, so don't do that. But we will get through it together, and we're going to get this quilt top together, and it's going to be amazing. A few supplies you're going to need to accomplish this quilt. You definitely want to go download your cutting guide from Riley Lake's website. You definitely want to bookmark Lori Holt's blog if you haven't already. And then you definitely need to subscribe to my channel so you get, and make sure you hit the bell for notifications so you know when my videos post, so you get tips and tricks each week. A few of the things you're going to need to accomplish this quilt: you definitely need your interfacing, and in the cutting guide it tells you to get 2 packages of Lori Holt's interfacing. So if you go that route, make sure that's what you get. Otherwise, you can use what I use. I use Pellon 30. I buy it by the bolt. I would say get a couple yards of that, and that should accomplish everything you need for this quilt. I typically err on the side of caution, and I would probably get 4 or 5 yards because interfacing is cheap, y'all. All right, so a few other things you need. You definitely need fabric, so gather all of that, whether you're going to try to put a kit together. If you're trying to put a kit together, look in the cutting guide, add up all the numbers, and figure out where you're at. I've done a little math for you, which I'll share in a little bit. Another thing you're going to need is the Sew Simple Shapes Set D. It's the Be Happy Quilt Sew Simple Shapes Set. You can find those on several different online stores. Your local quilt shop might have it too. Check with them first, of course. Last resort, you can always check on Amazon or eBay and Etsy, and those places would probably have the Sew Simple Shapes Set D for you as well. Now, the cutting guide also mentions that you may want some rickrack. It has a 12-yard spool of large vintage trim and cloud. Now, I know that this is used in several places and several blocks in the quilt. So if you need some rickrack, make sure you have some of that on hand. And then they have their fabric broken down into just different cuts. And it's because when quilt shops originally put these together, and even with her quilts now, they put together kits, and instead of giving you half a yard of everything, they're giving you fat eighths and fat quarters and sixth of a yard and half of a yard and all of these different cuts. So just understand that when you go through there, you got to do some math and figure out like how much. If you're going to use your scraps up like I'm going to do, then you're going to have to do even more math and figure out how much you think that you're going to need. Now, I've done a little bit of that for you just because the one thing that I was most concerned about is how much background fabric do I need. So from all of my calculations, I see that it's telling you we're going to need about 6 yards of background fabric. Now that includes a half a yard for the inside border. So make sure you have a good half yard cut for your inside border for some background fabric. They used a gray sewing. I'm going to use whatever I have half a yard of, to be quite honest. So make sure you have a half a yard of that. Now the other number that I was more concerned about was that outside border, because that's a really wide, pretty border. Now they used the green bandana originally, and they had 1 yard of that. So I'm going to make sure that I have 1 yard set aside for that outside border out of my fabric as well. Now, in addition to that, like I said, it's about 6 yards of background fabric, so that's those whites with a little bit of print on them. You could definitely just do a white background. You could do a mixture of backgrounds. You can go really scrappy like I'm going to do and just cut whatever you have enough of. So just kind of keep that in mind. That's the number you're shooting for, is around 6 yards of background fabric. Now, adding up the numbers in the cutting guide, I have a very hard time believing that I need 12 yards of those prints for the blocks. I know that kits typically give you way more than you need. So more than anything, I would just look in the cutting guide and make sure you're looking at those larger cuts there at the bottom, and just make sure you have those larger cuts that you need. And if you're going scrappy and using up your stash scraps, then you'll probably be all right, but it just depends on what kind of scraps you have, right? So it's kind of a game that we're playing here. I don't know if I'm gonna have what I need, but as I go along, I can kind of figure that out and pull from anything and kind of match the colors if I want to, or not match the colors if I don't. So my quilt is not gonna look like the original version, and it's probably not, and there's probably no way that you can follow my lead and make my blocks exactly the same way. So that kind of gives you a quick rundown of how I'm gathering my supplies, which I hope you're doing too. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these fabrics and I'm going to throw them in some project totes and let them wait there for me until I'm ready to use them and start doing those blocks. One of the first things I probably am going to do is just go and see how many of the hexie blocks I have to make, and cut out all those background squares for those, and then start tracing my interfacing shapes. So between now and August 1st, if you want to be at the same point that I am, then grab your cutting guide, grab your Sew Simple Shapes, grab your interfacing, trace all your shapes out. That's in the cutting guide. It will tell you how many of each one to do. Let me see what pages those are on. That's page 5 through 7 most likely. Yep. 5, 6, and 7 in the cutting guide tell you how many of each shape you need. So that's one thing you could be doing between now and then. Another thing you could be doing is you could start doing some of those hexie border blocks. So because there's going to be a bunch of those. So we're going to get started on those and then continue to work on those as we're doing our other blocks throughout the sew along. I hope that helps. I hope that gets you guys a little more prepared and a little more at ease and lessens some anxieties that I know some of you have been having about doing this quilt. I think that the tips and tricks I share each week while making the blocks will definitely help you. So I hope that you do still play along. I hope that if you can find yourself a kit that you do so. I hope that you do watch the videos and leave comments and feedback. I appreciate all of you viewing and subscribing. I love reading your comments, and I try to respond to those as quickly as I can. So yeah, this is going to be fun. This is going to start, like I said, August 1st, and then we're going to wrap up the first week of November. So if you do choose to play along, if you stay on track with me, you'll have the Be Happy quilt top together by the beginning of November. I hope you're carving out some time to craft and create. I hope you're finding joy in all you do, and of course, happy stitching.